"Don't do it, please," the completely paralyzed man begged as his fiancée slowly raised a deadly syringe over his chest with a smile on her face. There was no one left to save him, until a poor, overweight young woman everyone mocked crashed through the door and threw herself between them without thinking twice. She believed she was risking her life for a helpless stranger. She had no idea he was one of America's youngest billionaire CEOs. But the moment he grabbed her trembling hand and saw the strange mark on her palm, his entire world stopped. Why did that single mark change everything? Who was this poor girl really? And why was the woman who promised to love him so desperate to make sure he never lived long enough to tell the truth? 3 weeks earlier, the quiet town of Ashridge was just beginning to wake up. The streets were clean, the air carried the scent of fresh bread from the neighborhood bakery, and delivery trucks rolled through town like they did every morning. To anyone passing through, it looked like the kind of place where nothing terrible could ever happen. They were wrong. Inside a tiny one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, Emma Brooks carefully folded the blanket she had slept under on the living room couch. The couch had become her bed nearly 4 years earlier after giving the only bedroom to her sick mother. Springs poked through the faded fabric, but Emma never complained. Complaining never paid the bills. She quietly walked into the kitchen and opened the nearly empty refrigerator. A carton of milk, a few eggs, half a loaf of bread, and several bottles of medication filled most of the space. She reached for the medicine first. Food could wait. Her mother couldn't. Emma carried the medication into the bedroom, where 54-year-old Linda Brooks struggled to sit upright. "You should have woken me," Linda said weakly. Emma smiled as she poured a glass of water. "So you could beat me to making breakfast. Not happening." Linda chuckled before coughing into a handkerchief. "You work too hard." "I work enough." "No, sweetheart." Emma helped her swallow the morning pills before gently fluffing the pillow behind her back. "You have 2 jobs today again." Emma nodded. The grocery store until 4, then cleaning offices until almost midnight. Linda's face filled with guilt. "If your father were still alive." Emma immediately interrupted. "He'd tell us to keep fighting." Silence settled over the room. Both women missed him every single day. A framed photograph rested beside the bed. It showed 12-year-old Emma standing between her parents during happier times. Her father, Daniel Brooks, had been a mechanic known throughout Ashridge for helping anyone in need, even when they couldn't afford to pay him. Years before his sudden death in a highway accident, he had taught Emma that kindness was the only wealth nobody could steal. There had always been one memory Emma never fully understood. Every birthday, Daniel would gently take her left hand, kiss the small crescent-shaped birthmark on her palm, and whisper the exact same words. "Never hide this mark, sweetheart. Someday someone will recognize it." Whenever she asked what he meant, he simply smiled and changed the subject. After he died, the mystery died with him. Emma had long since convinced herself. It was simply one of those strange things loving fathers said to their children. She slipped her backpack over one shoulder. "I'll bring groceries home tonight." Linda forced a smile. "You always do." Emma leaned down and kissed her mother's forehead. "I love you. I love you more." Outside, Emma began the familiar 30-minute walk to Brooks' family grocery. She could have taken the bus, but the money she saved each day added up. Sometimes it meant another prescription refill. Sometimes it meant paying the electric bill on time. Every dollar mattered. As she crossed Main Street, 2 teenage boys sitting outside a convenience store noticed her approaching. One smirked. "Hey, look. The earthquake's coming." The other laughed loudly. "No, that's just Emma." Both boys burst into laughter. Several people nearby glanced toward her before quickly looking away. Emma lowered her eyes and kept walking. She had heard worse. Middle school had been worse. High school had been unbearable. Years of cruel jokes about her weight had slowly taught her to smile even while her heart broke. She had once tried every diet she could afford. She had skipped meals. She had exercised until her knees ached. But years of emotional eating after her father's death, combined with constant stress and little time to care for herself, left her trapped in a body everyone judged before hearing her speak. The insults hurt. But watching her mother choose between food and medicine hurt even more. By the time Emma arrived at the grocery store, customers were already pushing carts through the aisles. She tied on her green apron. "Morning, Emma," called her coworker Rachel. "Morning." Rachel smiled warmly. "You still helping Mrs. Jenkins after work?" Emma nodded. "Just carrying her groceries." "You never stop helping people." Emma shrugged. "I hope someone would do the same for Mom." Throughout the morning, Emma greeted every customer with patience. She helped an elderly veteran reach items from the top shelf. She entertained a restless little boy while his exhausted mother finished shopping. She carried heavy bags for a pregnant woman whose husband was deployed overseas. None of them noticed her weight. They noticed her heart. Unfortunately, not everyone looked that deeply. Around noon, the front door slid open. Expensive high heels clicked against the polished floor. Every employee recognized Melissa Grant immediately. She was one of Ashridge's wealthiest residents, known almost as much for humiliating working-class people as she was for flaunting her money. Without making eye contact, Melissa dumped designer handbags and imported groceries onto Emma's register. "Hurry." Emma smiled politely. "Of course, ma'am." Melissa impatiently tapped her manicured nails while Emma carefully scanned each item. "So slow." "I'm sorry. I don't pay premium prices to stand in line all day." Emma quietly continued working. Moments later, Melissa suddenly gasped. "My bracelet." She frantically searched around the counter. "My diamond bracelet is gone." Nearby shoppers turned immediately. Melissa slowly pointed toward Emma. "You took it." Emma blinked. "What?" "My bracelet." "I didn't." "You expect me to believe that?" People began whispering. "The employee stole from her." "I knew something was wrong." "Call the manager." Store manager Harold Benson hurried over. "What's going on?" Melissa folded her arms dramatically. "Your cashier stole my bracelet." Harold looked at Emma. "Empty your pockets." Emma obeyed without protest. "Nothing." He checked beneath the register. "Nothing." Melissa crossed her arms. "She's hidden it somewhere." Emma's voice trembled. "I swear I didn't take anything." At that exact moment, another customer approached holding a sparkling bracelet. "Excuse me." Everyone turned. "I think this fell into your shopping cart." Melissa looked down. The bracelet had become tangled beneath a package of paper towels she had purchased. For several uncomfortable seconds, nobody spoke. Emma waited. Surely Melissa would apologize. Instead, the wealthy woman simply snatched the bracelet. "Well," she adjusted her sunglasses. "Mistakes happen." Then she walked away, as though accusing an innocent woman of theft was perfectly normal. Emma slowly looked toward Harold. He avoided her eyes. "Emma, come with me." A cold feeling settled in her stomach. She had done nothing wrong. But somehow, she already knew her nightmare was only beginning. Harold Benson quietly closed the office door behind them before letting out a long, exhausted sigh. His office was barely large enough for 2 chairs, an old desk, and a filing cabinet that had seen better days. Through the small window, Emma could still see customers moving through the checkout lanes as if nothing had happened. She stood in front of his desk, clutching the straps of her worn backpack. "Mr. Benson." He raised his hand. "I know." Emma looked at him hopefully. "You know I didn't steal it." "I do." Relief briefly crossed her face, but it disappeared almost as quickly when Harold sat down and rubbed both hands over his face. "Then, it's not about the bracelet." Emma frowned. "Our customer service ratings have been dropping for months." She didn't understand. "What does that have to do with me?" Harold hesitated. The answer clearly made him uncomfortable. "You've had complaints. I've never been rude to anyone." "I know." "I've never stolen." "I know." "I've never been late." "I know." Emma's voice became barely audible. "Then what complaints?" Harold couldn't meet her eyes. He stared at the paperwork lying on his desk. "Some customers say they don't feel comfortable." "Comfortable?" He swallowed. "They think." He stopped. Emma already knew. "They think I'm too fat to represent the store." Silence filled the office. Harold finally nodded. "The owners think the store needs a different image." Emma felt as though the air had been sucked from her lungs. "So I'm being fired because of how I look." "It's not fair." "No. But it's happening." Tears burned behind her eyes, yet she refused to let them fall. "Please." Her voice cracked. "My mother depends on this job. I argued for you. I know you did. I really did." Emma believed him. Harold had always treated her with respect. But respect wasn't enough to save her job. He slowly slid an envelope across the desk. 2 weeks severance. Emma stared at it. The amount inside wouldn't even cover 1 month of her mother's medication. She carefully removed her green apron and folded it neatly before placing it on the desk. "Thank you for giving me a chance." Harold looked ashamed. "You deserved better." Emma offered the faintest smile. "Maybe someday." She picked up her backpack and walked toward the door. Just before leaving, Harold called after her. "Emma." She turned. "Don't let cruel people convince you that your kindness has no value." Emma nodded. "I won't." But as she stepped outside the office, she wasn't nearly as certain as she sounded. The news spread through the store astonishingly fast. Several employees looked heartbroken. Rachel hurried over and wrapped Emma in a tight hug. "I'm so sorry." Emma hugged her back. "I'll be okay." Rachel pulled away, just enough to look into her eyes. "No, you'll survive." She reached into her own purse and quietly slipped a folded $20 bill into Emma's hand. "For your mom." Emma immediately tried to hand it back. "I can't take this." "You can." "Rachel." "Don't argue." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." As she walked toward the exit carrying the small cardboard box containing her belongings, whispers followed her through the store. Some customers felt sorry for her. Others simply stared. A teenager discreetly lifted his phone and began recording. "That's the woman who got accused of stealing." His friend laughed. "No. The fat cashier." Within seconds, another voice chimed in. "Run before she eats the whole grocery store." Laughter echoed behind her. Emma kept walking. Years ago, those words would have shattered her. Now they simply added another crack to a heart that had already been broken countless times. Outside, she sat alone on a weathered bench near the parking lot. She finally allowed herself to cry. Not because strangers had laughed, Not because she had lost her job. She cried because she had no idea how she was going to buy Linda's next round of medication. After several minutes, Emma wiped away her tears. No. She shook her head. Mom needs me. She stood up. Her second job cleaning offices still started in a few hours. If she could convince her supervisor to let her work extra shifts, perhaps they could survive another month. She adjusted her backpack and began walking toward home. The shortest route took her along an old county road that passed abandoned farmland on the outskirts of Ashridge. Most people avoided it. Emma didn't. Saving 20 minutes of walking meant getting home earlier to check on her mother. As she made her way down the quiet road, a gentle breeze rustled through the tall grass. An old wooden sign leaned crookedly near a rusted gate. Miller Farm closed. The property had been abandoned for years after the elderly owners passed away with no family to inherit it. Children often dared one another to sneak onto the land, claiming the empty barns were haunted. Emma had never believed those stories. Still, she glanced toward the neglected buildings as she walked past. For a strange moment, she felt as though someone was watching her. She paused. The wind died. Everything became unusually quiet. Then, nothing. She smiled at herself. I'm letting those ghost stories get to me. She continued walking. Hidden behind the overgrown trees, almost impossible to see from the road, stood an old storage shed with boarded windows. A faint metallic glimmer briefly flashed through one of the narrow cracks before disappearing. Emma never noticed. Miles away, in the heart of New York City, another life was unraveling. Inside one of the nation's most prestigious private hospitals, 34-year-old Grady Lawson lay motionless in a luxury recovery suite overlooking the skyline. Only weeks earlier, business magazines had celebrated him as one of America's youngest self-made billionaire CEOs. As the head of Lawson Biomedical, he controlled a multi-billion-dollar healthcare empire that stretched across hospitals, research centers, pharmaceutical companies, and cutting-edge medical technology firms. Employees admired his brilliance. Competitors feared him. Investors trusted him. Now, he couldn't even move his legs. Machines quietly monitored his heartbeat, while sunlight spilled across the polished floor of his room. Grady stared at the ceiling, frustration burning behind his calm expression. His fingers tightened around the hospital blanket. A memory replayed itself for what felt like the 1,000th time. Screeching tires. The violent snap of twisting metal. His SUV smashing through a guardrail. The world spinning. Darkness. Doctors insisted the crash had been a tragic accident caused by brake failure. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice refused to believe it. He couldn't explain why. It wasn't evidence. It wasn't logic. It was instinct. The same instinct that had helped him build a billion-dollar empire from almost nothing. Outside his room, elegant high heels clicked softly against the polished hallway floor. A beautiful woman carrying a bouquet of white lilies approached his door. The nurses smiled warmly. There she is. He's lucky to have such a devoted fiancée. The woman smiled with perfect grace. Thank you. As the hospital door slowly opened, her warm expression remained flawless. But the instant it closed behind her, the smile disappeared. Her eyes turned cold. Calculating. Patient. Predatory. Vanessa Collins had arrived. And although everyone believed she had come to comfort the man she loved, she had come for something far more dangerous. The nightmare was only beginning. Here's the first section of Scene 2. Grady Lawson had built an empire, by noticing details that everyone else ignored. Even now, lying motionless in a hospital bed with machines quietly monitoring every heartbeat, his mind refused to stop working. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his private recovery suite, casting long shadows across polished marble floors. The room looked more like a luxury penthouse than a hospital ward. Fresh flowers lined the windowsill. State-of-the-art medical equipment stood silently in one corner. 2 private security officers remained outside the door around the clock. Everything about the room reflected wealth. Everything except the man lying in the bed. Grady stared at the ceiling, unable to feel anything below his waist. Every attempt to move his legs ended the same way, with complete silence from his own body. His jaw tightened. "This isn't over," he whispered to himself. The words weren't spoken out of hope. They were a promise. 3 weeks earlier, he had stood before thousands of employees during Lawson Biomedical's annual leadership summit in New York. Investors called him the future of American healthcare. Reporters described him as one of the youngest billionaire CEOs in the country, a man whose companies employed tens of thousands of people and funded groundbreaking medical research. He had earned every dollar. Unlike many heirs born into privilege, Grady's fortune hadn't appeared overnight. His late father, Richard Lawson, had owned a modest regional medical supply company. When Richard died unexpectedly, the business was struggling under heavy debt. Most advisors urged Grady to sell what remained before it collapsed completely. Instead, 24-year-old Grady mortgaged nearly everything he owned to save it. For years, he worked 18-hour days, sleeping in his office more often than in his own apartment. He negotiated contracts personally, visited hospitals himself, listened to doctors instead of ignoring them, and reinvested every profit back into research. Within a decade, the small family business had grown into Lawson Biomedical, a global healthcare empire. His success earned admiration. It also earned enemies. That truth had become impossible to ignore after the accident. The official report claimed a mechanical brake failure had sent his SUV over a mountain guardrail while returning from a business retreat. Everyone accepted the explanation. Everyone except Grady. His memory of the crash refused to leave him alone, just before pressing the brake pedal. He had glanced into the rearview mirror. For the briefest instant, another vehicle had appeared unusually close behind him. Black, unmarked, then nothing. The impact had erased everything else. Doctors told him memory often became unreliable after severe trauma. Maybe they were right, or maybe someone wanted him to believe that. A gentle knock interrupted his thoughts. His longtime attorney, Michael Carter, stepped inside carrying a leather briefcase. "Good morning." Grady forced a faint smile. "Depends who you ask." Michael pulled a chair beside the bed. "Physical therapy starts again this afternoon. I'm more interested in the investigation." Michael's expression became cautious. "Police still believe it was an accident." "You?" The attorney hesitated. Years of working together had taught Grady to recognize every subtle change in Michael's face. "You have doubts." Michael quietly lowered his voice, requested an independent forensic review of the SUV. Grady looked directly at him. "You didn't tell anyone?" "No. Even Vanessa?" "No." Grady gave a slow nod. "Good." Michael leaned closer. "Until we know more, trust as few people as possible." Before Grady could respond, footsteps echoed outside the room. Michael immediately sat back. The hospital door opened. Vanessa Collins entered carrying a bouquet of white lilies and wearing a warm smile that seemed capable of comforting anyone who saw it. "Oh, good," she said sweetly. "You're awake." She crossed the room and gently kissed Grady's forehead. To every nurse watching through the glass door, she looked like the picture of unwavering devotion. But as she placed the flowers into a vase, her eyes briefly drifted toward Michael's briefcase. Only for a second, long enough to notice it had been opened, long enough for the smallest flicker of concern to pass across her face before the smile returned. No one in the room reacted, no one except Grady. He noticed everything. Vanessa arranged the white lilies with slow, graceful movements, humming softly as if nothing in the world could disturb her peace. "Your favorite," she said with a gentle smile. Grady looked at the flowers. "They're beautiful. I knew they'd brighten your day." She pulled a chair close to his bed and carefully took his hand in both of hers. "Been praying every night." The words sounded sincere. Every nurse who passed the glass doors smiled at the sight. One whispered to another, "She's never missed a single day." Other nodded. "I wish everyone had someone who loved them that much." Vanessa heard the compliment. Without turning around, she allowed herself the faintest smile. That was exactly what she wanted people to believe. For the past 3 weeks, she had arrived at the hospital at almost the same time every morning. She greeted every doctor by name. She brought coffee for the nurses. She thanked every orderly who adjusted Grady's bed. Sometimes she even stayed late enough for photographers outside the hospital to capture emotional images of her holding his hand through the window. By now, local news stations had begun calling her the devoted fiancée. Social media adored her. Millions of strangers praised her loyalty. Only one person had begun noticing the tiny cracks beneath the perfect performance: Grady. He remembered the woman he had proposed to 6 months earlier. She had always been polished, elegant, and socially confident. Those qualities had attracted him in the beginning. But after the accident, something subtle had changed. Whenever doctors discussed his chances of walking again, most loved ones would lean forward with hope. Vanessa did something different. She watched the doctors' faces, not his. Whenever a physician mentioned possible improvement, disappointment flashed across her eyes for less than a heartbeat before disappearing behind another comforting smile. It was so brief that almost nobody would have noticed. Almost nobody except Grady. Years of negotiating billion-dollar contracts had trained him to study expressions more carefully than words. His instincts refused to ignore what his eyes kept seeing. Vanessa gently squeezed his hand. "Walk again." "I hope so." "Will." Her answer came too quickly, almost rehearsed. Michael quietly closed his briefcase. "I should leave you two alone." Vanessa smiled warmly. "Thank you for always looking after him." "My job isn't finished yet." As Michael walked toward the door, Vanessa casually asked, "Any updates from the insurance company?" Her tone sounded harmless, curious. Michael stopped for only a fraction of a second, still processing everything. "I imagine it's a mountain of paperwork." "It is." He offered a polite smile before leaving. The moment the door closed behind him, Vanessa's eyes lingered on the hallway for several seconds, listening carefully until Michael's footsteps disappeared around the corner. Then she looked back at Grady. "Are you really feeling tired?" "Therapy?" "No," tilted her head, thinking. Her smile barely faltered. "Always thought too much." "Maybe." She reached for a cup of water and held the straw near his lips. He took a sip. "Thank you. You've never had to thank me." A brief moment, silence settled between them. It should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt strangely heavy across town. Another kind of silence filled a small apartment. Emma unlocked the front door and forced herself to smile before stepping inside. "I'm home." Linda looked up from the old recliner. "Early." Emma quickly placed grocery bags on the kitchen counter, deliberately turning her back so her mother wouldn't immediately notice the redness around her eyes. "I stopped by the discount market." "You found good prices." "The best." It wasn't entirely a lie. She had spent nearly half of her severance pay buying discounted food and medication before coming home. Linda smiled. "You always know how to stretch a dollar." Emma busied herself putting groceries away. If she stopped moving, she feared she might start crying again. Her mother watched quietly. A mother's heart often recognized pain before words did. "Emma." Look at me." Emma slowly turned. Linda immediately noticed the empty space where Emma's green grocery apron should have been folded over her arm. Her smile faded. "What happened?" Emma tried to answer. The words wouldn't come. Instead, tears filled her eyes. Linda's shoulders sank. "Oh, sweetheart." Emma crossed the room and knelt beside her mother's chair. "I lost my job." Linda gently brushed a tear from Emma's cheek. "They fired you?" Emma nodded. "For something I didn't even do." She explained everything. Melissa's accusation, the bracelet, the manager's decision, the comments about the store's image. Linda listened without interrupting. When Emma finally finished, the apartment became painfully quiet. Then Linda reached for Emma's left hand. Her thumb rested over the small crescent-shaped birthmark. just as Daniel Brooks had done countless times years earlier. For a moment, Linda's expression became distant. A memory surfaced. Daniel standing in the garage late one evening staring thoughtfully at their little daughter's hand. His voice had been unusually serious. "Promise me something," Linda had asked. "No matter what happens to me. Never let Emma believe she's ordinary." "It's just a birthmark, Daniel." He had slowly shaken his head. "No, one day, someone will recognize it." Before Linda could ask another question, Daniel had simply smiled and kissed Emma's forehead. He had never explained what he meant. The memory disappeared as quickly as it came. Linda looked back at her daughter. "Your father believed your life would matter in ways neither of us could understand." Emma gave a sad smile. "Right now it doesn't feel that way." Linda gently squeezed her hand. "Then your story isn't finished." Emma looked down at the mysterious mark. For the first time in years, she wondered if her father's words had meant something more than simple comfort. Outside the apartment window, the afternoon sun slowly drifted toward the horizon. Neither woman realized that somewhere far away, a man who had once seen that very same mark as a frightened little boy was unknowingly moving closer to crossing Emma's path once again. The threads of two lives, separated for more than 2 decades, had already begun pulling toward each other. Neither of them knew it yet, but fate had already chosen the day they would meet. That evening, the executive board of Lawson Biomedical gathered inside the company's 48th floor conference room overlooking Manhattan. The room reflected everything Grady Lawson had built over the last decade. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the glowing skyline. A polished walnut table stretched nearly 30 feet from end to end. Interactive screens displayed quarterly financial reports, research updates, and expansion plans into Europe and Asia. Normally, Grady would have been sitting at the head of the table. Tonight, his chair remained empty. The silence surrounding it felt heavier than any speech. "Mr. Lawson asked that today's meeting continue as scheduled," announced Olivia Hayes, the company's chief operating officer. She had worked beside Grady for nearly 12 years, earning his trust through competence rather than flattery. "He'll join us remotely." A large monitor flickered to life. Grady appeared from his hospital room. He looked pale, thinner, but his eyes hadn't changed, sharp, focused, observant. "Good evening," he said. The executives greeted him respectfully. Several offered encouraging words. Others avoided mentioning his condition altogether. Grady appreciated neither sympathy nor false optimism. "Let's get to work." For the next hour, the meeting unfolded exactly as it always had: contracts, research funding, hospital acquisitions, budget forecasts. Despite lying in a hospital bed, Grady corrected financial projections from memory, questioned a supplier's pricing model, and identified an inconsistency in an overseas investment report that no one else had noticed. The executives exchanged quiet glances. Their CEO was still very much himself. When the meeting ended, Olivia remained connected after everyone else logged off. "You pushed yourself too hard." Grady smiled faintly. "Had easier days." She hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Do you trust everyone around you?" The question lingered. Grady didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the darkening city beyond his hospital window. "No." Olivia frowned. "Is this about the accident?" "It's about what happened before it." She leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Grady's expression hardened. 3 days before the crash, someone accessed confidential merger documents from my private office. "That's impossible." "So I thought." The security logs were erased. Olivia's eyes widened. "It recovered them, only fragments." "What did they find?" "Nothing useful." He paused. "Whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing." Olivia remained silent. Grady trusted her. But even trust had limits now. "I need you to do something." "Anything." "Quietly review everyone with access to executive-level files." "You think someone inside the company is involved?" "I think someone close to me knew where I'd be that day." Olivia slowly nodded. "Be careful. Don't tell anyone you're looking." The call ended. Grady leaned back against his pillow. His heartbeat had become slightly faster, not because of the business meeting, because every new question seemed to point toward someone he desperately hoped was innocent. Across the city, Vanessa Collins stepped out of the hospital wearing the same warm smile she had shown everyone inside. Several reporters waiting near the entrance noticed her immediately. "Miss Collins, "How's Mr. Lawson doing?" She stopped gracefully. "He's fighting." "Do doctors expect a recovery?" "We're staying hopeful." "Has this been difficult for you?" Vanessa's eyes glistened. She lowered her head just enough for cameras to capture the emotion. "Watching someone you love suffer," she allowed her voice to tremble, "is something I wouldn't wish on anyone." Reporters thanked her. Within minutes, the interview began spreading across news websites and social media. Comments flooded in. "She's incredible. True love still exists. He's lucky to have her." Vanessa entered the back seat of her waiting luxury sedan. The driver closed the door. The smile disappeared instantly. She tossed her phone onto the seat beside her. "Take the long way." "Yes, ma'am." Instead of heading home, the car quietly left downtown and entered an older industrial district nearly 30 minutes away. Streetlights became fewer. Warehouses replaced office buildings. Finally, the sedan stopped beside a deserted brick building that looked abandoned from the outside. Vanessa stepped inside without knocking. A man in his late 50s waited in the shadows. His expensive suit contrasted sharply with the deteriorating building. His name was Victor Sloan. Officially, he operated several international investment firms. Unofficially, he specialized in solving problems wealthy people didn't want traced back to them. "You kept me waiting," Victor said. "I came straight from the hospital." He studied her expression. "Become quite the actress." Vanessa ignored the remark. "Any updates?" Victor placed a thin folder on the table. The brake system was destroyed exactly as instructed. Vanessa didn't touch the folder. The investigators, so far they believe it was mechanical failure. "So we're safe?" Victor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slowly lit a cigar. "Dislike that word," she frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means accidents sometimes leave survivors." Vanessa folded her arms. "Can't even walk." Victor looked directly into her eyes. "He can still think." Room became quiet. Victor continued. "Men like Grady Lawson don't build billion-dollar companies by accepting convenient explanations." Vanessa looked away. "He suspects something. I would be disappointed if he didn't." She took a slow breath. "So what do we do?" Victor's answer came without emotion. "You finish what you started." Vanessa's eyes met his. "You mean, if he dies from complications related to his injuries?" He shrugged. "No one asks difficult questions." Vanessa remained silent. Victor leaned closer. "You wanted his fortune. Wanted your debts erased. You wanted freedom." His voice hardened. "There is only one path left." Several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, Vanessa nodded very slightly, almost imperceptibly. "I understand." Victor slid another envelope across the table. Inside were forged hospital credentials, a schedule of security rotations, and photographs of restricted service entrances. "This is your only opportunity." Vanessa carefully closed the envelope. "When?" Victor smiled coldly. "When everyone believes you're simply visiting the man you love." As she walked back toward the door, Victor called after her. "Oh," she stopped. "If you fail this time." His expression darkened. "There won't be another chance for either of us." Vanessa left without replying. Outside, she stood beside her car for nearly a minute, gripping the envelope so tightly that the edges bent beneath her fingers. The city lights glittered in the distance. To everyone else, they represented opportunity. To Vanessa, they were counting down the time she had left to make a terrible decision. Far away, in the quiet town of Ashridge, Emma finished washing the dinner dishes and prepared for her evening cleaning job, completely unaware that her ordinary life was moving toward a collision with people whose world was built on billions of dollars, deadly secrets, and a destiny her late father had somehow seen long before she ever could. Emma arrived at the downtown office building just before 6 in the evening. The 12-story structure belonged to an accounting firm that hired an outside cleaning company after business hours. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid enough to keep the lights on in her apartment, at least until she found another daytime job. She changed into a blue janitorial uniform, tied her hair back, and pushed her cleaning cart down the polished hallway. "Evening, Emma," said Carl, the night supervisor. "Evening. I heard about the grocery store." News traveled fast in Ashridge. Emma forced a smile. "Be all right," Carl nodded thoughtfully. "If you need extra shifts, let me know." Emma's eyes brightened. "Really? We just lost another cleaner." Relief washed over her. It wasn't a solution, but it was hope. "Thank you. You've earned it." Unlike many employers, Carl judged people by their work ethic instead of their appearance. In the 3 years Emma had worked there, she had never missed a shift, never complained, and often volunteered to cover for sick coworkers. As she emptied trash bins and polished conference tables, she quietly replayed her father's words. "Never hide this mark, sweetheart. Someday someone will recognize it." She glanced down at the small crescent-shaped birthmark resting in the center of her left palm. She gently rubbed it with her thumb. "I wish you had told me what it meant, Dad." The mark had never caused her pain. It had never changed. Yet both of her parents had looked at it differently. Her father had treated it almost like a promise. Her mother looked at it with quiet sadness. Emma couldn't understand either reaction. She simply tucked the thought away and continued working. Outside the office building, the night sky slowly settled over Ashridge. Hundreds of miles away, another night had begun inside the private hospital in New York. The evening nursing shift replaced the day staff with practiced efficiency. Medication carts rolled quietly through the corridors. Doctors completed final rounds. Visitors gradually disappeared. The hospital became calmer, exactly as Victor Sloan had predicted. Vanessa returned just before visiting hours ended, carrying another bouquet of flowers and a small paper bag from Grady's favorite restaurant. Every nurse greeted her warmly. "Back." "I couldn't stay away." One of the nurses smiled. "He's lucky." Vanessa returned the smile effortlessly. "No, I'm the lucky one." As she entered Grady's room, she found him staring out the window at the city lights. "You brought dinner. I know you haven't been eating much." She unpacked the meal with practiced care. Grady looked at her. "Been here every day, of course. You must be exhausted. Rest when you're home." It was exactly the kind of answer everyone expected from a loving fiancé. But Grady noticed something else. Her eyes briefly shifted toward the digital keypad beside his hospital door. Just a glance, barely noticeable, then she looked away. Another tiny detail, another unexplained observation. His instincts quietly filed it away. Vanessa adjusted his blanket. "Step out for a moment and let you eat." She leaned down and kissed his forehead. "Love you." Grady looked into her eyes. "Thank you." She waited, almost as if expecting him to say the words back. He didn't. For the first time since the accident, he couldn't. Something inside him refused. Vanessa left the room, maintaining her calm expression until the door clicked shut behind her. The instant she reached the empty hallway, she removed the folded envelope Victor had given her earlier. Inside were photographs, security schedules, forged ambulance documents, and a detailed map of the hospital's restricted service corridors. She studied every page carefully. A nurse passing nearby smiled. "Everything all right?" Vanessa quickly folded the papers shut. "Just insurance documents." The nurse nodded and continued walking. Vanessa slipped the envelope back into her purse. Tomorrow night everything would begin. At the same moment, Michael Carter sat alone in his law office reviewing files connected to Grady's accident. He had intended to go home hours earlier. Instead, one small detail refused to leave his mind. He reopened the accident photographs. The crushed SUV, the broken guardrail. The mountain road, nothing unusual. Then he enlarged one image. His eyes narrowed. Near the edge of the road, almost hidden by shadows, were faint tire marks heading in the opposite direction. They didn't belong to Grady's vehicle. Someone else had been there. Michael immediately reached for his phone. Before he could dial, the lights in his office suddenly flickered. Then, the computer screen went black. Every file disappeared. What? He tried restarting the system. Nothing. A warning message appeared. FILES permanently DELETED. Michael stared in disbelief. Someone had accessed his secure network remotely. Someone knew he was investigating. He slowly leaned back in his chair. This wasn't an accident anymore. It was a conspiracy. And whoever was behind it was already watching. Back in Ashridge, Emma finished her shift close to midnight. The streets were nearly empty as she walked home beneath the glow of scattered streetlights. She passed the old county road again. For just a moment she looked toward the abandoned Miller farm. The building stood silently beneath the moonlight. Nothing moved, nothing made a sound. She smiled at herself. Guess the ghosts took the night off. She continued walking, completely unaware that within 48 hours, those abandoned buildings would become the place where fate, betrayal, love, and revenge would violently collide. In a luxury penthouse overlooking Manhattan, Vanessa carefully placed the forged hospital credentials inside her designer handbag. In his apartment, Michael Carter copied every surviving accident note onto paper, realizing digital evidence could no longer be trusted. Inside the hospital, Grady stared at the city skyline, his instincts growing louder with every passing hour. And in the tiny apartment in Ashridge, Emma quietly checked on her sleeping mother before finally allowing herself to rest. 4 lives, 4 different worlds, moving toward the same unavoidable moment. None of them realized that once those paths crossed, nothing would ever be the same again. Scene 3. The following afternoon, Grady Lawson lay perfectly still as another physical therapy session came to an end. Again, he said through gritted teeth. The therapist looked concerned. Already pushed beyond today's limit. Again. Therapist exchanged a quick glance with the attending physician before helping Grady attempt another movement. Nothing. His legs remained lifeless. A wave of frustration crossed his face, but he refused to slam his fist against the bed or shout. Simply closed his eyes and inhaled slowly. Get there. Therapist admired that determination. So will we. After everyone left, Grady remained alone with his thoughts. He replayed every detail surrounding the crash, the business retreat, the mountain road, the vehicle behind him, the brakes. Then another memory surfaced. 2 days before the accident, Vanessa had insisted he cancel a private helicopter flight because she wanted them to spend more time together by driving. At the time, it had felt romantic. Now, it felt strangely deliberate. He wasn't accusing her, not yet. But another piece had quietly fallen into place. Across the hallway, Vanessa smiled warmly at passing nurses while carrying another bouquet of flowers. She had perfected every expression, every pause, every sympathetic glance. No one questioned her devotion. As she entered Grady's room, she noticed him staring thoughtfully out the window. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked. He turned toward her. "I was thinking about the retreat." Her heartbeat skipped. What about it? The road. It was terrible. It was. She carefully placed the flowers into a vase. "You shouldn't torture yourself by reliving that day." "I'm trying to remember." She walked closer. Sometimes memories after trauma become unreliable. The sentence sounded innocent, but Grady immediately recognized something. Those were the exact words one of his doctors had used. Only 3 people had been present during that conversation. The doctor, Grady, Vanessa. She had repeated the phrase almost word for word. Another detail. Another quiet note filed away inside his mind. He smiled faintly. "Maybe you're right." Vanessa relaxed. She believed the conversation had ended. It hadn't. Not inside Grady's head. Meanwhile, Michael Carter spent the morning visiting the company that had serviced Grady's SUV only a week before the crash. The lead mechanic reviewed every maintenance record. Brakes were perfect. Michael leaned forward. "You're certain?" "I signed the inspection myself." Mechanic disappeared into a storage room before returning with printed diagnostic reports. Everything passed. Michael compared the dates. The inspection had occurred only 5 days before the accident. A catastrophic brake failure made less and less sense. As he prepared to leave, the mechanic called after him. There was one strange thing. Michael stopped. "What?" A woman called the day after the inspection asking unusually detailed questions. "What kind of questions?" She wanted to know exactly who had access to the vehicle after it left our garage. Michael's expression hardened. "Did she identify?" "You recognize her voice?" The mechanic shook his head. "But she sounded nervous." Michael thanked him and walked toward his car. Instead of driving away immediately, he opened a small notebook and carefully wrote down every new detail. He had stopped trusting electronic files. Someone had already erased those once. He wouldn't give them another chance. Back in Ashridge, Emma arrived home carrying groceries purchased with nearly the last of her savings. Linda was sitting by the window knitting a baby blanket for a neighbor's granddaughter. "You didn't have to buy fresh fruit," Linda said. Emma smiled. "It was discounted." Linda knew that smile. It usually meant Emma was hiding another sacrifice. "You skipped lunch again, didn't you?" Emma looked away. "I wasn't hungry." Linda gently reached across the table. "Lie to your mother." Emma laughed softly. "You always know. You've had that same face since you were 12. For a brief moment, both women remembered the difficult months after Daniel Brooks died. Emma had often claimed she wasn't hungry so Linda could eat instead. Some habits never disappeared. Linda quietly slid half the fruit back toward Emma. "We share." Emma nodded. we share. As they prepared dinner together, someone knocked on the apartment door. Emma opened it to find Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly widow she often helped with groceries. "I heard what happened." Emma smiled politely. "I'll find something else." Jenkins handed her a folded envelope. "I can't accept this. You aren't accepting charity." "What is it?" "You've earned it." Inside was the payment Mrs. Jenkins had secretly saved from dozens of small errands Emma had refused to charge for over the past year. Emma's eyes filled with tears. "You kept all this. I knew someday you'd need it." Emma hugged the elderly woman tightly. "Thank you." Jenkins smiled. "World notices kindness more than you think." As she walked away, the camera of a passing teenager briefly captured Emma helping Mrs. Jenkins back to her car. The video would seem unimportant now. But later, when the world believed Emma was a criminal, that simple recording would become one of several small pieces proving the kind of person she truly was that evening. Inside an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of New York, Victor Sloan stood before two men wearing paramedic uniforms. The uniforms looked authentic. The identification badges were nearly impossible to distinguish from genuine hospital credentials. "Tomorrow night," Victor said calmly, "you enter through the South Service entrance." One man nodded. "Security cameras." Victor placed a flash drive onto the table. "Loop 11 minutes of old footage." "The patient," "You follow instruction." The second man hesitated. "What if hospital staff interfere?" Victor's expression became ice cold. "They won't." "If they do." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The silence answered for him. Vanessa stood quietly in the corner listening. Her face betrayed nothing. Inside, a storm was growing. She had convinced herself she wanted Grady dead, now that the moment was approaching. Even she couldn't completely silence the fear. Victor noticed. "Changed your mind?" "No." He stepped closer. "Remember what happens if Grady lives." Vanessa thought of the crushing debts, the threats, the late-night phone calls, the photographs of her younger brother being followed. She slowly closed her eyes. "No," she whispered to herself. "There is no turning back." Far away, Grady looked out the hospital window at the same sunset Emma was watching from Ashridge. Neither of them knew that before another 48 hours passed, their lives would collide inside an abandoned farm shed, where betrayal, destiny, and a mysterious birthmark would change both of their futures forever. The following evening, an uneasy feeling settled over Grady Lawson's hospital room. He couldn't explain it, but years of leading a billion-dollar company had taught him never to ignore his instincts. Something about the hospital felt different. Nurses who normally chatted in the hallway seemed distracted, security guards changed shifts at unusual times, and the atmosphere carried an unsettling silence. When Vanessa arrived with her usual warm smile and flowers, no one questioned her presence. She greeted the nurses by name, thanked the doctors for caring for Grady, and even brought coffee for the staff. To everyone around her, she remained the picture of a devoted fiancée. But behind that carefully rehearsed kindness, she was quietly watching the hospital's routines. Each glance toward a security camera, each look at a service hallway, and each mental note of changing shifts confirmed that Victor Sloan's plan was unfolding exactly as intended. Grady noticed those glances. They were subtle enough that no one else would have paid attention, but he had spent years reading people in high-stakes negotiations. Vanessa seemed less interested in him than in everything surrounding him. When she thought he wasn't looking, her eyes drifted toward the hallway outside his room, then to the electronic lock on the door before returning to him with another reassuring smile. "Everything all right?" Grady asked. "Of course," she replied softly. "I'm just making sure they're taking good care of you." He nodded without arguing, but another quiet doubt settled into his mind. Elsewhere in the hospital, Michael Carter met discreetly with Olivia Hayes. Rather than discussing business, they compared the troubling discoveries each had made. Michael revealed that the vehicle inspection showed Grady's brakes had been functioning perfectly just days before the crash, while Olivia admitted someone had accessed confidential executive files shortly before the accident. Neither piece of evidence proved sabotage, but together they painted an increasingly disturbing picture. "We're missing something," Olivia said. Michael agreed. "Or someone." Both decided to continue investigating in secret, unaware that their conversations were already being monitored through compromised hospital communications. As night fell, the first stage of Victor Sloan's operation quietly began. A maintenance contractor entered the hospital's restricted utility room carrying what appeared to be routine equipment. Hidden among his tools was a small electronic device programmed to temporarily loop recorded security footage. Within minutes, the device silently connected to the hospital's surveillance network. Nothing appeared unusual on the monitors. That was precisely the point. At nearly the same time, one nurse reported that a vial of restricted cardiac medication could not be located in the secured pharmacy cabinet. Assuming it had simply been misplaced during a busy shift, she documented the discrepancy and planned to report it in the morning. A second nurse mentioned seeing unfamiliar ambulance personnel near the service elevators earlier that evening. Another staff member dismissed the concern, explaining that specialists often transferred patients after hours. The conversation ended there. These seemingly unrelated incidents passed unnoticed, but together they formed the layered clues that would later expose the conspiracy. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Ashridge, Emma Brooks accepted an extra cleaning shift after Carl offered her additional hours. The opportunity brought temporary relief, but exhaustion weighed heavily on her. During a short break, she looked at the family photograph she kept inside her wallet. Her father's smiling face reminded her of the promise he had repeated throughout her childhood. Never hide the mark on your hand. Someday, someone will recognize it. She traced the small crescent-shaped birthmark with her thumb before returning the photograph to her pocket. She still believed her father had simply been comforting his daughter. She had no way of knowing that the mysterious mark would soon reconnect two lives separated for more than 20 years. Back in New York, Victor Sloan reviewed the final details of the operation with his hired men. Wearing authentic-looking paramedic uniforms and carrying forged transfer documents, they rehearsed every step. The forged paperwork identified Grady as a patient requiring immediate transport to a specialized rehabilitation facility. Because the documents matched official hospital formatting, and the surveillance cameras would soon display looped footage, only careful scrutiny could expose the deception. Victor issued one final warning: no improvisation. 11 minutes. That's all you have. Men nodded. Vanessa remained silent. Although fear briefly crossed her face, thoughts of overwhelming debt, relentless threats from Victor's criminal associates, and the belief that Grady would eventually uncover her financial crimes hardened her resolve. The emotional conflict within her made her actions believable without excusing them. Late that night, as hospital lights dimmed and visiting hours officially ended, Grady stared through the window at the city skyline. His instincts continued warning him that danger was close, but confined to his bed and unable to move his legs, he had no way of acting on those fears. Outside his room, two men dressed as paramedics stepped quietly off an elevator, pushing an empty hospital gurney toward the corridor. The trap had been set. Within minutes, the conspiracy would move from deception to action, and the events that ultimately led Emma Brooks to an abandoned farm, and to the man whose life was forever tied to hers, would finally begin. The fake paramedics entered Grady Lawson's room with calm professionalism, presenting forged transfer orders that appeared completely legitimate. Because the hospital's security cameras were looping pre-recorded footage and the evening shift was unusually busy, no one immediately questioned the transfer. Vanessa played her role perfectly, acting like a worried fiancée while secretly ensuring every step of Victor Sloan's plan stayed on schedule. Grady immediately sensed something was wrong. "I wasn't told about any transfer," he said. One of the men answered smoothly. "Your specialist approved it only a few minutes ago, sir." Explanation sounded reasonable, but Grady noticed neither man addressed him by name. It was a tiny inconsistency, one most patients would never catch, but his instincts flared again. Before he could ask another question, a sedative was injected into his IV line under the pretense of preventing pain during transport. His vision blurred. The last thing he saw was Vanessa standing near the doorway, She smiled reassuringly, but her eyes held no warmth. As the ambulance left the hospital through a little-used service exit, Michael Carter returned with new evidence connecting the brake failure to deliberate sabotage. He reached Grady's room only to discover it empty. Staff confidently informed him that Grady had been transferred to another rehabilitation facility. Michael frowned. "I authorized no transfer." Charge nurse froze. "What?" Within minutes, confusion spread through the hospital. Phone calls revealed that no receiving rehabilitation center was expecting Grady. Security officers reviewed surveillance footage only to find everything appeared perfectly normal, exactly as Victor's electronic loop had been designed to show. The delay bought the kidnappers precious time. Meanwhile, the ambulance drove far beyond the city limits before turning onto isolated country roads. Eventually, it stopped at an abandoned farm hidden behind overgrown trees and rusting fences. Inside an old storage shed, the men secured Grady to a medical bed before leaving him alone with Vanessa. When the sedative wore off, Grady slowly opened his eyes. "Where am I?" Vanessa closed the shed door behind her. "Somewhere no one will hear you." Realization spread across Grady's face. "You planned this." "I had to." "Why?" For the first time since they met, Vanessa stopped pretending. Years of carefully rehearsed affection disappeared. She confessed that crushing gambling debts and forged financial crimes had trapped her under Victor Sloan's control. When Grady survived the staged car crash, she became convinced he would eventually uncover everything. If he recovered, she would lose not only his fortune but also her freedom. "Never wanted your love," she admitted quietly. "I wanted your money." Stared at the woman he had planned to marry. The betrayal hurt more deeply than the paralysis. Vanessa removed a syringe from a medical case. "It will look like complications from your injuries." She stepped closer. Grady struggled desperately to move, but his legs remained completely lifeless. "Vanessa, don't." His plea echoed through the empty shed. Several miles away, Emma Brooks finished another exhausting cleaning shift and began the long walk home. To save bus fare, she chose the familiar shortcut past the abandoned Miller farm. Though tired, she carried groceries for her mother and hoped to arrive before midnight. As she passed the rusted gate, the night air grew strangely still. Then she heard it, a faint voice. "Help!" Emma stopped walking. She looked around. Nothing. She took a few more steps again. "Please." The sound was weak, desperate. Most people would have assumed they had imagined it. Emma didn't. She carefully pushed open the broken farm gate and followed the voice through tall grass toward the abandoned buildings. Every instinct warned her to turn back, but compassion outweighed fear. She reached the weathered storage shed. Through a narrow crack in the wooden wall, she saw a horrifying sight. A beautiful woman stood over a completely paralyzed man, raising a syringe toward his chest while he struggled helplessly to stop her. Without thinking about the danger, or who either of them might be, Emma grabbed a rusted shovel leaning against the wall. She tightened her grip. Then she charged toward the door. The next few seconds would change all three of their lives forever. Emma didn't stop to think. The moment she saw the helpless man strapped to the hospital bed and the beautiful woman raising a syringe over his chest, instinct took over. She grabbed the rusted shovel leaning against the shed wall with both hands. She shouted. Vanessa spun around. "What are you doing here?" Emma didn't answer. She swung the shovel with every ounce of strength she had. Crash! The old wooden window exploded inward, showering the room with broken glass. Vanessa instinctively stepped back. The syringe slipped from her fingers and landed on the floor, rolling beneath the hospital bed. "You idiot!" Vanessa screamed. Emma climbed through the shattered window despite cutting her arm on broken glass. "I saw everything." "No, you didn't." Vanessa lunged toward the syringe. Emma tackled her before she could reach it. Both women crashed into a stack of old wooden crates that burst apart beneath their weight. Grady watched in horror. "Get out of here," he shouted. "She's dangerous." Emma ignored him. She struggled to hold Vanessa down, but Vanessa drove an elbow into Emma's ribs and shoved her away. Emma slammed into a steel shelf. Old tools rained onto the floor. Vanessa grabbed a heavy iron pipe. "You should have minded your own business." She swung it. Emma barely raised the shovel in time. Clang! The impact knocked the shovel from her hands. Pain shot through both of her arms. Vanessa swung again. This time the pipe struck Emma's shoulder. Emma cried out but refused to retreat. She charged forward, wrapping both arms around Vanessa's waist. The two women wrestled across the dusty floor, knocking over medical equipment and smashing into the hospital bed. Grady desperately tried to help. His hands gripped the mattress. Every muscle in his upper body strained. He pulled. Nothing. His legs remained completely lifeless. For the first time in his life, billions of dollars meant absolutely nothing. He couldn't even save the woman risking everything for him. Vanessa finally broke free. She crawled toward the syringe beneath the bed. Emma saw her fingertips reaching for it. No. Emma threw herself across the floor and caught Vanessa's wrist. The syringe rolled even farther away. Vanessa snarled with rage. "You've ruined everything." She suddenly sank her teeth into Emma's left hand. Emma screamed in pain. Blood immediately trickled across her palm. As she instinctively pulled her hand away, the blood spread across the small crescent-shaped birthmark she had carried since birth. Grady's eyes widened. His entire body froze. That mark. He knew it, not from today, from long ago. His breathing became uneven as memories he had buried for more than 20 years came flooding back. He was only 8 years old again, lost during a charity event near a rural river. Curious, he had wandered away from the adults and stepped onto the rotten boards covering an abandoned irrigation pit. The wood collapsed beneath him. Heavy timber trapped his leg. He screamed until his voice became weak. Hours passed. Darkness slowly covered the sky. Then, a little girl's voice. "Cry, we're here." She couldn't have been older than 4. She knelt beside the pit while her father climbed down despite the unstable boards threatening to collapse. The little girl never stopped talking. She picked tiny wildflowers nearby and kept showing them to the frightened boy, telling him everything would be all right. When her father finally lifted Grady free, the little girl reached out to hand him one of those flowers. That was when he noticed it. A tiny crescent-shaped mark on the center of her left palm. He never forgot it. Later that night, his father, Grady Lawson, spent hours searching for the mechanic and his daughter who had disappeared before anyone could thank them. Years later, before Richard passed away unexpectedly, he had held young Grady's shoulder and said, "If life ever gives you the chance to repay the little girl who saved you, don't waste it." Memory shattered. Grady returned to the present, his eyes filled with tears. It's you." Emma looked toward him, confused. "What? You saved me." "Never met you. You saved me once." His voice trembled. "And now you're saving me again." Emma had no idea what he meant. Before either of them could speak again, Vanessa shoved Emma with all her strength. Emma's back slammed into a steel support beam. She collapsed to the ground. Vanessa seized the opportunity and sprinted through the rear door of the shed. Outside, distant police sirens echoed across the empty fields. Victor Sloan's contingency plan was already in motion. Minutes earlier, an anonymous call had reported that a heavy-set woman had kidnapped Billionaire CEO Grady Lawson after attacking his fiancée. A false report reached emergency dispatch before the officers arrived. By the time police rushed into the shed, the scene looked exactly the way Victor intended. Emma was beside Grady. The restraints had been broken during the struggle. The syringe lay on the floor with Emma's fingerprints on it from when she had knocked it away. The broken window and smashed door suggested a violent confrontation. To the officers, it looked less like a rescue than a kidnapping gone wrong. "Step away from him," one detective shouted. Emma raised both hands. "No, please listen, she was trying to kill him." 2 officers immediately grabbed her. "I didn't do this. Tell it to the station." They handcuffed her despite her desperate pleas. Grady fought to speak. "No," he forced the words out between painful breaths. "She's innocent." The lingering sedatives, exhaustion, and the strain of the fight overwhelmed him before he could finish. Doctors quickly sedated him again after his blood pressure spiked dangerously. Emma screamed as officers led her toward a patrol car. "I was trying to save him." No one listened. News helicopters soon circled overhead. Within an hour, television stations across the country broadcast the same shocking headline: "Poor woman arrested after billionaire CEO found abducted." Internet judged her before hearing a single fact. Back at the hospital, Michael Carter refused to accept the official story. There was no authorized transfer, he insisted. Olivia Hayes joined him in reviewing independent tracking records from Grady's armored SUV security network. which had silently continued collecting external location data. One still image stopped them cold. A hand opening the fake ambulance door wore a distinctive emerald engagement ring, the same ring Vanessa Collins had worn every day for months. Olivia looked up slowly. It was her. Michael nodded grimly. And we've just been handed the first piece that can prove it. Meanwhile, inside Victor Sloane's warehouse, Vanessa paced nervously. Victor slid an old photograph across the table. She picked it up. Richard Lawson stood smiling beside a younger Daniel Brooks at a charity event decades earlier. Standing in front of them was a little girl holding wildflowers. The same little girl who had grown into Emma Brooks. Vanessa's face lost all color. Victor's voice was cold. You thought she was nobody. He leaned closer. You just framed the one woman Grady Lawson has unknowingly owed his life to for more than 20 years. Vanessa stared at the photograph, realizing too late that her greatest mistake wasn't failing to kill Grady. It was making an enemy of Emma Brooks. As Emma's patrol car disappeared into the night, Grady lay unconscious. Vanessa's lies were beginning to crack, and the first threads of the conspiracy were finally coming apart. But the darkest chapter of all was only beginning.